The Gospel of John, chapter 1, verses 40 through 51. The first chapter of John is also known as the coming of Christ, as his identity is being revealed, and those who are to follow him are called and gathered. You're invited to follow along on the screen or Bible as I read. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him, about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph, from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" Philip said, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming towards him, he said of him, "Here is truly an Israelite, in whom there is no deceit." Nathanael asked him, "Where did you come to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." And Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man."
Thank you, Gary. May God grant us wisdom and understanding. Ain't but one train on this track, runs to heaven and right back. This line from the spiritual we just sang was written at least before the U.S. Civil War, 1861. Is that right? Yep. The one train on the track, as Pastor Jody already shared, is this Jesus, Son of God, Messiah. He's the ultimate connector between heaven and earth, between our time, chronos time, chronological time, and eternity. So the question that it's my job to ask of you and myself is, how well connected are you to that train, to that Jesus train? Do you feel like you're on it, or that somehow it left you in the station? What would your spouse say about it? About you and how close you are to Jesus? Would they say, "I think somebody threw you off the train"? Or that, "Oh no, he's right up there with the conductor"? What would your children or grandchildren say about that question? How close is grandpa or grandma or mom or dad to Jesus? What we feel matters to our spiritual health. And it shows in the way we treat other people, how close we feel to this divine love, especially those closest to us. They can sense, they can feel whether we've got the Spirit or not. In high school, it was always that cheer back and forth. "We got the Spirit, how about you? We got the Spirit." "Yes, we do. We got the Spirit, how about you?" And then the other side would do the same, right? Yeah, we can kind of tell when somebody has it or doesn't have it. Feeling close to the Spirit is so important because it's the Spirit that empowers us to respond to the call of God in our lives to, at a very young age, sing in front of all these people, or at middle age to bend on your knees and pull weeds out on a Wednesday, or in your sunlight years to find meaningful ways to serve in the prayer ministry, or folding the preview each week. There's so many different ways to serve. MBCC has a lot of heavy lifting to do, and therefore all of us have a job. The Spirit empowers us to do both what needs to be done, but the Spirit also guides us on how it's to be done. These lyrics, "Every time I feel the Spirit moving in my heart, I will pray." They emphasize the importance, the connection, the junction between the Spirit and our prayer life. So again, it's kind of my job to say, how's that going for you? How's your prayer life? African-American scholar W.E.B. Du Bois, or maybe it's Du Bois, I'm not sure, ascribed 3 gifts from the African-American community. And the first is the gift of story and song. The second is the gift of sweat and brawn. And the third is the gift of, anyone want to guess? Spirit. Spirit. He claims that the Spirit imbued African slaves had both joy and endurance through the worst hell any of us could imagine. One former slave put it this way: in slavery times, my master whipped me terribly, especially when he knew I was praying. He was determined to whip the Spirit out of me, but he never could. Isn't that beautiful and haunting? Last Sunday, I preached about the Spirit descending after the heavens were torn open, and some of you liked the imagery of a dive-bombing pelican, and others really didn't, and that's fine. But the message was affirming that Jesus, right? Jesus is just coming up drenched with the Jordan River water, just comes up out of the water, and he hears this beautiful message from God, identifying both who he is and how pleased God is with him. For the enslaved Africans, the Jordan River was very significant. It symbolized both an earthy sort of symbol, right? So like the Underground Railroad, like the boundary between slavery and freedom in the north, but it also had a spiritual component for the slaves. They would see the Jordan River as that boundary water between, the desert, wilderness, slavery, and the promised land, the heaven. So there was this both spiritual understanding when they sang this song, the songs that involved the Jordan River, and an earthly, literal sense, right? And there are numerous biblical references to the Jordan River, and it's linked to the promised land, this boundary water of the promised land. So there's both this earthy and this spiritual, and they get connected in this moment that we talked about last week with Jesus. Jesus as the great conjunction, right? So William McCain says this about our opening spiritual. He said, this widely known hymn describes the power and energy released in black devotion to the God of emotion. Black people have never had any concept of a God who could not be felt. It is this feeling of the Spirit of God that renders the black religious experience incomparable to any other, end quote. Now, I don't know how you feel about that. Most of you, it looks like we're pretty lily white out here this morning. And that's more of a demographic, hopefully, more a reflection of our demographic in Manhattan Beach than anything else, because I think we pride ourselves on how inclusive we are and diverse in our theological perspectives. But I don't know about you, I've always felt something spiritual when I sang the spirituals. I grew up at church camp. We would go in the summer, and that's when the good music happened. As a kid, that's what the kind of music I loved, camp songs. And but when it got time for spiritual stuff, the Vespers down at the shoreline of Crystal Lake, that's when we sang spirituals. We sang songs like, it's a me, it's a me, it's a me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. You know that? Not my brother, not my sister, but it's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. Every camper singing that song, all different ages, identified with the need for more prayer in our lives. Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart, in my heart. Lord, I want to be a Christian in my heart. Now that song is a prayer, isn't it? It's a prayer of contrition. It's a prayer of seeking to be made whole and holy. And singing spiritual songs like that, it stirs within me memories of heaven on earth, because that's exactly what family camp, church camp was for me. I mean, surrounded by all that love, I couldn't help be more loving. And I tell you what, my parents were at their best. My siblings were at their best. I was at my best. Life didn't get any better than that little break from the stress and pressures of life, where we could go off for a whole week up in God's beautiful up north Michigan on Crystal Lake, a gorgeous, beautiful, turquoise blue, clear lake, and enjoy worship and love and fellowship. That's what church family camp was like for me, life at its best. What would it take for us to replicate that experience every time we gather right here as a church family, where the takeaway would be that sense, that feeling, viscerally, that spiritual, emotional connection with God and each other? What would it take? Now, for some of you, say it's already happening, and that's great, and that's why you're here. But for others, maybe there's more we can do. There's more we can do. In this morning's text, Jesus says to Nathanael, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened." There's another heaven opening. "You will see heaven opened, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." Now, in last Sunday's text, the heavens opened and God declared Jesus to be the beloved Son of God, and it was the Spirit, symbolized as a dove in that case. But this morning, it's angels of God, and angelos, Greek for angels, is literally translated messengers of God, coming and going, ascending and descending, heaven and right back. Ever since Augustine, theologians have perceived a connection between this image of ascending and descending, of connecting earth and heaven, with Jacob's vision of the ladder of angels at Bethel. That's in Genesis 28. And that's another spiritual song that we sang at camp. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are, yeah. And as a kid, there you go, yeah. Soldiers of the cross. Yeah, every rung goes higher, higher. And I felt it because there were several sets of stairs. And as a little kid coming back from Vespers, we had to climb each one of those stairs. And I couldn't hardly sing and climb at the same time, but we did it. We managed to get all the way back up to the top. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. This spiritual implies God's promise to the biblical patriarch Jacob. And it's for the slaves, when they would sing it, it was the promise of freedom. Whether that was this worldly salvation or the world to come. The song became one of the first African American spirituals to be popular among white Christians. We sang it in the 60s, as I said, after the Vespers on the shore of Crystal Lake in Michigan. And as we climbed, we were singing. Jacob is remembered as the one who saw God face to face. And in that encounter with God, in that close feeling, that emotion, that connection, he was transformed. And that's our hope too, right? That we would leave from this place a little bit better than we did when we drug ourselves in. Isn't that our hope? That after encountering God, we would be transformed a little bit more, loving, a little bit more Christ-like. Jacob's new divinely given name, Israel, speaks to this transformation. Think of Jacob before. He was this incorrigible man of guile. And then he's given this new name, and he's, in effect, the personification of God's redeemed people. Likewise, as Gary read about Nathanael, he beholds Jesus in today's text, and he too sees the very face of God, just as Jacob did. And when Jesus addresses Nathanael, he addresses him in an interesting way, as a man without guile. Just the opposite of what Jacob was like before his transformation. Here is Nathanael, a man without guile. In other words, he establishes Nathanael as the new Jacob, as the ideal Israelite. All this to say that when we encounter the Spirit, we are transformed and become more like Christ. And that's really what discipleship is. It's first of all this willingness to walk with Jesus. And it's not about an observance to a set of doctrinal statements or some abstract set of codes. It's not all having to agree theologically or biblically. It's a consent to a costly yet joyful, Jody referred to it as a joyful but can be scary, this Jesus train that we get on. But it's worth it. Jesus, the Son of Man, is the ultimate ladder, stretching between heaven and earth. Jesus is the point of contact, you might say, between finite and the infinite. Ain't but one train on this track, runs to heaven and right back. Conjunction, junction, what's your function? A conjunction, as Jody said, is all about joining things together. And that's what Jesus does. Jesus is the place where heavens are opened. I think of that song, we can see clearly now, the rain is gone. That's kind of what Jesus does. Clear the fog, clear the clouds. We can see in a way that we couldn't before. We can see divine glory, and we can feel it. And friends, I just want to say it can be felt. Amen? You can feel the Spirit. During a recent staff meeting, some fellow staff members gave me some honest feedback on my Christmas Eve service at 8 o'clock. They said it was too heady, too much like a history lesson, not enough heart. And so I fired them. No, seriously. Can you imagine somebody doing that? No. One thing I appreciate about my fellow staff members and some of you leaders, lay leaders, you'll call me up, you'll text me, you'll give it to me, you'll let me know. And I love it. I love it. You do it in a loving way. You do it because you want the church to be better. You do it because you want me to be better. And I appreciate that about my fellow staff members in their blunt honesty. And I confess their assessment. I went back, listened to my message, and goodness sakes, they were accurate. And I needed to hear that. And I'm glad we've created safe space at Manhattan Beach Community Church where honest and constructive criticism is the norm. How else are we going to get better? How else are we going to spur each other on? Ego, check it in at the door, right? Humility and growth and giving glory to God, not ourselves. That's what it's about. So their comments prompted me to do some self-reflection, and honestly, I'll admit, sometimes it feels safer just to stay in my head. All this spirit talk can make me a little nervous. I mean, it's safer. Just avoid those matters of the heart, because the heart can be scary at times. The heart can cause pain at times. And some of us, if we're not careful, can go through a divorce or something like that and become walking numb emotionally and disconnected. No conjunction between the head and the heart. It's good to be reminded. Because that's not what God expects of us. God wants us to be wholehearted. And it's only natural to want to stay in control. I get it. We want to stay in control of our emotions, and we don't want the spirit to get too out of hand here, right? We don't want to get carried away with religious experiences. What will they say of us? And we've seen how some TV evangelists can certainly manipulate the emotions of naive crowds of people in order to milk them out of money that for many they can't afford to give. Yet surely there's got to be a way to connect emotionally with God without feeling as though you're being manipulated. And so I think our preconceived notions of God and God's activity, they're important. They can either help us or hinder us. They can actually prevent us from an authentic encounter with God if we fear being tapped in emotionally to the divine. But when we do, new horizons open, the clouds clear, and we see what we didn't see before. Maybe we see something we didn't want to see in ourselves, and that's okay, because part of the work of the Spirit is to convict, not to condemn, but to set us free from bad thinking, stinky thinking, bad habits, messy emotions. Pastor Jody, Kate Krellin, and I met this past week to plan for our first kind of new worship service. We don't even have a name for it yet, it's so new. It's going to kick off next Sunday night in the assembly hall downstairs, and we were talking about how do we craft an experience there where especially young families, but it's open to everyone, but especially young families who are busy. You know what they say now? They say the mindset of people is, if you ask them, are you an active church goer? They'll say, oh yes, I'm an active church goer. Really? How often do you go to church? Once a month. And they're proud of it. Once a month equals active, very active church goer. And some families, maybe we'll only get them once a month because there's soccer and ballet and all these other things and junior guards or whatever else. And if we get them once a month, what are we going to do in that worship experience where they can leave like I left from family camp, transformed? And so we talked about that, and we want worship like that, both here and downstairs, to connect both the head and the heart. We know that. And we recognize the importance of connecting with the whole person in order for it to become a transformational experience. And so music is being selected with that goal in mind. You know, everything we do around MBCC is an attempt to follow Jesus. However you see Jesus, whatever your views are of Jesus, that's your freedom here. And we celebrate diversity of thinking, but it's all about really chasing after, getting on this train, so to speak, in our programs, in our prayers, in our songs, in our service, even in our Mardi Gras dance parties. It's a great opportunity to invite your friends. People who would otherwise, I call them de-churched or unchurched, who would not dare walk in the church doors. I've actually had cycling friends of mine say to me, Spitters, if I went to your church, I would catch on fire the minute I walked in. You know, and they have this fear because they know that they have some sense of not being holy enough or not being justified enough to even worship. But they can come to a Mardi Gras party, and then you can get their stinky thinking cleared up and let them know that we're all sinners here, and